No. Okay. Hi, Jack.
Hi, David. I'm here in Mullumbimby, New South Wales on the longest day of the year, December 21st, 2019. And you're there in Asheville, near Burnsville, North Carolina, on almost the shortest day of the year. And we're going to talk about your history of the wellness movement back in the 70s when I started the Wellness Resource Center and you came out to California. I kind of followed you out and we bounced around and you helped out a lot with our early stage of development. And just so viewers know, there's an early recording that we did, mine was almost 10 years ago, that you'll see the link to, where we talked about your early history and your present work with World Cafe, which we will expand on in another recording with you and Juanita shortly. So today we're going to focus on the 70s and wellness. And when's the first time you heard the word wellness?
I heard it from you. I heard it from you in Maryland when we first met each other about your intention of going to California and really stepping fully into the field of what wellness meant to you, and making your connection to Mr. Dunn and other players, and your excitement about doing that. So we happened to land in the same place at the same time in the Bay Area, and the rest is history.
I forgot to mention, yes, we met in the DC area. I was living in Columbia, Maryland, and you were in the north side of DC, and we were in a transactional analysis reparenting marathon when we first connected, and we really bonded and started getting together. I remember taking you sailing on Wild Lake in Columbia on my little sunfish. We ran into a rock with us and got flying into the water. So we were connecting then. And so when you then moved to California first, you and Judy, but I'd already planned to go in, I think it was June of 75, but you went in what, like March or some earlier time. So you were already there when I got there. And I struggled with getting, our center was behind time. It was supposed to be finished, but it didn't get open until November of that year. And so you started then doing this training with Hardy Jones, who I also hope to get on here, in which Joy was doing, Joy Holloway, in eductivism. So say a little bit about how you got into that and your, because that was what you brought to us as well.
Well, eductivism was a takeaway, so to speak, from the Scientology world, and it was designed in a secular way rather than Scientology as a church. And eductivism really focused on concentration and being able to stay focused. And it used the galvanic skin response mechanism that was a very early variety of a lie detector, I guess. And the facilitator would ask you questions, and the idea was to be able to the facilitator would read the GSR and really support the person participating by sharing where there was coherence electronically from the meter, from the GSR meter. So it was a really good practice. I mean, one of the things I remember most from it is being able to stay focused and to be able to stay clear with another person sitting right across from me, and excuse me, and looking him or her directly in the eyes and connecting with that person in a deep way. So that's the best I can remember about that way back in the early 70s.
Right, and as I recall, it was Jack Horner, who was a colleague of L. Ron Hubbard, and I thought they co-developed it, but they went different directions. The technology is one of asking questions and seeing what the response is emotionally through the biofeedback device, which was way more sensitive than the galvanic skin response we were using for treating stress. When I saw the difference between the two, and like Joy told me there were something like 20 different readings you could detect, whereas in clinical GSR, you get one reading and that's it. Very gross. And yeah, we use that also at the wellness center. Joy counseled a lot of our clients. But then you brought your skills to the organizational development that we were struggling with, where I was, I started out with a part-time biofeedback practitioner and sharing a secretary and thinking I was going to have a little operation, with just the two of us, until George Leonard wrote us up and Don Ardell wrote us up, and we suddenly started getting all this national attention, or local attention first and then national attention. And then Ken Maui joined us, and he hired Barbara McNeil, Bobby Burdette, and we had Joy, and we had, pretty soon we had up to 13 people at one point. And I was overwhelmed because I had no management skills whatsoever. And I was the one where the buck stopped. So I had to pay the bills. And I was getting into my patriarchal bossy doctor, medical deity, masters in domination thing, which Kenneth picked up on and actually hired a family, a family therapist who came in and worked with our group. That was for a couple times, but you did a lot more work with us in terms of helping us structure our relationships with each other. And that's what I most remember. What do you remember about?
Well, let me take one loop back first. You gave me my very first experience of biofeedback.
Yes.
IMG. You hooked up the electrodes to the frontalis muscle between my eyes, and you taught me, you shared that I could actually turn off the beeps by relaxing and learn. And I learned, I can still feel it today. When I'm tense, I can tune into my frontalis muscle and remember how to relax, and imagine that the machine was slowly stopping beeping. That was the objective, to turn it off. It took me a while, but I think I learned how to do it pretty well. But
I've forgotten that. Yeah, we did it at your apartment down in DC. And
no, not that I remember.
Once we did.
Maybe I don't remember that. I remember doing it at the Wellness Resource Center.
Oh no, we did it actually because I bought the machines before I got to California.
Well, maybe, but I think we did. I don't remember the Washington. That part of.
I think actually, what happened then is I was struggling trying to teach myself how to do it, so I trained you to work with me as a client. I think that's what we were doing in DC, and then later,
maybe. Well, I think
two old men in our memory.
You got a better memory than I do, anyhow. So that's because you're a lot younger.
Yes, a lot younger. What, 4 years?
Yeah.
You're 80, 81, going on. Yeah. Well, in darn good shape with all that hair too.
So getting back to what we did organizationally, I think we mostly talked about what we cared about, what was important to us. As I remember, what were the minimal infrastructure, so to speak, that we needed to put in place. But to me, what was most important was designing the conversations we had around that in a way that we got to recognize each other and respect each other and be vulnerable with each other. We learned it was not a struggle. I mean, most of the people had done a certain amount of psychology or therapy. And so we were able to have some good conversations. And I think that we did that for about 4 or 5 months, didn't we, Jack?
At least I remember you came in a variety of times, but because I had very little skill in that area, I credit you with bringing that social lubricant to our struggling group, because we expanded and we were floundering for quite a
Well,
while.
the what we were all doing is I've had the privilege to do it most of my professional life. It's about designing an environment of mutual trust and respect where people feel safe to be themselves. And the fact that you and I had a relationship like
Mhm.
that, even though you're a lot taller than I am,
Not much.
um, that we were able to mirror that, so to speak, and the other people seem to come on board. I do remember all the straightforward conversations more than anything else.
Right. Well, and white males doing this no less.
Yeah.
We were probably making some history in that arena.
Well,
But I do,
we had some good women around us.
yeah. And I do credit you with having, and this is the earliest that I know of, inkling of what became your profession with World Cafe, when you hooked up with Juanita and formalized it, and what you've been doing since then, like for our ATLC summits in 2003 and 2004, which you brought the World Cafe, and your thread of participation in different layers of my own wellness journey has constantly been there. Plus the fact that you regularly get on my case when I'm being too rigid or overthinking or whatever. We
No,
have a Skype call and you straighten me out.
it's just your natural Capricornian energy, which is a great gift to the field of wellness over the years. The fact that you could, I mean, you have always, and I shared this with you earlier, you've always been a builder, builder in fields that were just beginning. You sometimes would share with me that you thought that you might be a man ahead of his time. But in retrospect, where wellness and all the aspects of wellness have emerged over the years, you weren't ahead of your time. You were just ahead of the crowd, and helping people, particularly with some of the materials in the book and some of the practices, able to help people identify what was wellness, what could wellness be in several different categories. And that led to the wellness inventory, as I remember, and some of the other writings that you and the Wellness Resource Center put out into the world that still are being used.
Well, historically, the wellness inventory actually preceded opening the center, but I didn't think I could write because I had to do remedial English when I got to the College of Worcester, coming from a little high school where I'd only written one paper, and it was a chemistry paper. I didn't think of myself as a writing, and you kept hounding me. You should write a book. You should. Nah. I remember walking up the stairway right at the landing when you turned, and you're saying you were introducing, what was the guy's name that had the textbook company? Do you remember who I mean? There was a guy you knew who was publishing health texts. And you were suggesting.
It's coming. It'll come.
I just now remember that event.
It begins with a P, I think.
Yeah. Well, eventually you won out, and I decided to write a book, and we did it on the Selectric typewriter and 3-ring binder, and then we went to collate the thing and hired some high school girls, and we had it spread out all over the floor and in the center, and they were collating it, but they weren't very good, and they were using a 3-ring hole punch, and they mispunched some of the pages, and the holes were in the wrong place. It was a nightmare, but we eventually put together, I think, 4,000 of those 3-ring binders.
Wow!
Over a 2 or 3 year period.
You still have it, any of those?
Yeah, yeah, they're around. I'm going to put one of them online. And then
Good.
it was 10 Speed Press that eventually published it as the mass market book. But I think I dedicated it to you because had no thought of writing a book except for your hounding.
I thought I was encouraging you, but I guess
Oh, yes.
Juanita tells me that my encouragement sometimes seems to be more like hounding. So I understand what you're talking about.
Well, hound dog like you, of course, that would be natural. But
Ain't nothing like a hound dog.
we can break into
Uh,
song here. So
it's been a lot of years.
yeah, that was those were the days. And because you and I both had the experience with Valerie and Harry of being in groups, and I put together what I called a lifestyle evolution group, which was a therapy group without therapy, where people could meet and share their concerns and growth sort of things, evolve their lifestyle without having a diagnosis. And I don't know if you ever participated in that, but it was direct outgrowth of our common experience with Valerie. So there's also a link to Valerie elsewhere on the page, and her mentor, the woman who started all,
Jackie
Jackie
Schiff.
Schiff. Yeah. So Valerie interviews her. That's about 20 years old, that recording, but I put that up too. So David, we were brothers. We've known each other for 40, well, it would have been 74, so 40, 45, 46 years. And,
Wow.
And we're still there for each other. It's let's mention your honorable mention that you initiated me into. That just
You
as
want
the
me
current.
shall I share what that was or what
Yeah,
is?
yeah.
Well, I had the privilege back then, very, very early, to have met some really wonderful people, really authentic people who were able to be strong and yet vulnerable at the same time, who told the truth, so to speak, with their voice and the way they lived in the world. And I had been with several different organizations, and I was not about wanting to build another organization particularly. So I said, why don't I design an organization that has no board of directors, has no fundraising, has no officers, but the only purpose is to recognize people who had this quality, this essential quality of being uh, then I saw quality of what? Oh, of being a mensch. A mensch being a Yiddish word or German word, the same word, that means it's a gender neutral word. It can be a man or a woman. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, it can be a man or a woman. And so Yvonne Devine is certainly a mensch. I hope you brought her in. If not, you should. But anyhow, um, what are we going to call this group of mensches? No, that's not the plural of mensch. In mensch in German or in Yiddish is the plural of mensch is Menschen, Menschen. And so, then the light went on. And so, we will call it honorable mention. And then we had a little ritual in which I would invite a person like yourself, who I deeply respect and trust and love, and to become a member of Honorable Mention. And there's no requirements whatsoever, but there's one privilege. When the invitee, so to speak, decides that he or she is willing to be a member of Honorable Mention, they have the privilege of inviting other people without telling me or anybody else. My guess is that I have personally invited probably a couple hundred people over the years. So who knows? Because there is no list. There is no list of how wide it's spread. Although I do know there are wonderful honorable mention all over this earth, and who carry the heart energy and the mind energy to continue to help transform our world during challenging times.
And what a gift you brought, David, and that's wellness in its truest sense.
Oh, I never thought
zero
of
budget.
Huh? I didn't hear that.
The beauty of that is a zero budget, because my struggles were the budget and paying people and rustling up the money each month, which I managed to get by getting paid speaking gigs, but we could never actually get enough income from the center to cover our overhead. That was always close each month. And then we eventually decided to close it.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I'm going to get back to that in a minute. But what was interesting is that I think that gift that I was given to even think about something like that may have come from Esalen, or some of the psychological stuff we had done together. But the interesting thing about it is that it's been the core to my life, not necessarily honorable mention, but designing environments and spaces through relationships and dialogue where people feel safe to be themselves, with the assumption that when we feel safe to be ourselves, we're really in a wellness field. We can really contemplate what well-being is, either in the organization or in the community or in the corporation or even in the culture. And and then the belief that there can be critical mass that can emerge from that kind of dialogue and learning among people who trust each other and who are asking similar questions about how to design life that works. Over to you, Jack.
Well, I'm just again reminded of what a shining paragon of wellness you have been for me for 46 years. I'm just remembering a quote of yours from probably the 80s of "shift happens." And you made that up. I've seen it elsewhere.
Not original. Not original.
I heard it first from you.
Yeah. Well, it's a question. In the midst of all this challenge that we all have always faced in our worlds, what if shift is already happening? Instead of just seeing the word without the F and working to solve problems. And one of the core elements of wellness, as I remember it and still remember it, has to do with the possibility consciousness. That if we can remind ourselves individually and collectively where our minds or our hearts or our bodies or our nutrition is well, and continue to do it and notice where those aspects of our life are not as well, and to identify what can be added to build the possibility of wellness much more broadly.
Jumping back again to the 70s, thank you, Dave. That's eloquently put. I'm just remembering another commonality. You mentioned Esalen, which we both, you probably had more time there than I did, but it was an important angle for me, and I'm hoping to get either Michael or Dulcie Murphy on board. But, and then we had the transactional analysis reparenting, how we met. But another big factor was what was then called the S training, as I recall. I did it in September of 75, but I think you'd already done it, hadn't you?
1972.
72. So you did it in DC?
72 or 3, I think.
So you did it in DC?
I think I did it in DC, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It wasn't Werner who was doing it. It was somebody else. I can't remember. I think his name was Joyner.
Jerry Joyner. I'm hoping to track him down because I had him too. And I also did the course. He's a
Isn't he up?
physician in
I'm
Tiburon.
sorry. Isn't Joyner in over there and up over?
He's in Tiburon, I think. Last I
Oh, really? Wasn't he from Australia?
no, not
Huh.
that I'm aware of.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, he's on my list. So that was while I found the organization a little constraining and domineering, the information was very powerful for me. I actually went to one of their introductory evenings and was so turned off I almost didn't go. And then I slept through part of it, but they said it didn't matter if you were awake or not. And it really made a difference for me over the time. And then another bonding experience, or
Wait,
another one where you,
wait, Jack. Before you move
yeah,
beyond F, I want to say one thing about it. There were many challenges with it, particularly the high energy marketing, so to speak, that turned on an awful lot of people. But what it did do, it allowed 300,000 people over the years that it was around to get at a minimum, the idea that we might just be at cause of our experience as contrasted with being at effect of our
exactly,
experience, a
yeah,
victim. And that was really big for
Not-
me because I had a lot of
yeah,
stuff about victimhood which wasn't deserved because I was never really a victim.
yeah. And that was in the era where we created Sufferers Anonymous too, which is passed on your earlier recording, fighting over who's the president of Sufferers Anonymous, which was replaced by honorable mention. But now the 300,000 figure, was that just the S training, or does that include Landmark, which is the current?
No, I think that includes just the S training. I think
Uh-huh.
I think S trained over 300,000 people, as I remember, but I'm not
And
a
then that
mathematician.
morphed into Landmark and the forum, which is still going, and which I did later on and found very valuable too. Um, and
So
the,
you wanted to move to something else.
well, then there's another one that you again got before me. You're really my older brother, which was the Mankind Project, and you know
MKP.
Bill Kauth out there in Milwaukee, who I'm also interviewing elsewhere. Uh, but I heard about it first from you, and then Skip told me he'd done it, and he said that he hated it so much he almost left, but then he noticed 6 months later that his life had changed. So that talked me into doing it, and I'm
Well,
still.
the contribution that I think we both got there, and many people got with MKP through the New Warrior Men's Initiation Training, was a place, not only through the training, but to the integration groups that people are able to go
Yeah.
to, and still it's very much alive, where it's safe to be in my emotional field, where it's safe to be angry or sad or afraid or even loving or joy, and in a place where judgment is not encouraged, judging someone as being not good enough. So
Or
supporting
it's
men.
recognized as judgment and not truth.
Well said. Well said. And so again, getting spaces of being real, being in conversation in a safe place. It comes back to that over and over again. And the traditional allopathic medicine practice, it's not a safe place, tends not to be a safe place because there's leveling there. I'm very fortunate to have a doctor here in Burnsville who's an osteopathic physician who treats me and Juanita as equal people, where she has her profession, we have ours, and we learn together into how to be as healthy and well as we can be, adult to adult. So back to transactional analysis, not being a parent as a consultant or a doctor, not being parent to the child place, but working at an adult to adult level.
Well put. And this reminds me of yet another arena that you pioneered, of the shadow work with Cliff, what was his last name?
Cliff Barry.
Barry, who I never actually met or experienced, but it was around that time that Marin and I discovered Michael Ventura's Shadow Dancing in the USA, which was a collection of his articles in an LA weekly, which inspired me to recognize shadow and starting to do what we called shadow dancing in our group. So, which remains to me the most fundamental and difficult and sort of pinnacle of wellness work, is when you can own your shadow. And as I think it's Robert Bly says, eat your shadow, by owning it and taking back your projections, which is the ultimate in self-responsibility. And it's a tough sell.
Well, the core of wellness is self-responsibility.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons that you, in addition to the financial reason why you closed the center, as I remember, is that people were coming to you to do something you never wanted to do as an MD, fix them. And you wouldn't do it. And you made the right decision. You wouldn't fix those people. You say that it's their work. You'll help them with it.
Well, we actually had a contract for them to sign in the first session.
Oh, I remember that.
Said that we will not treat, diagnose, or prescribe. And yet I found in doing my wellness assessments, which were a 2-hour one-on-one, they'd filled out all the forms ahead of time, computerized nutritional survey, health risk appraisal, wellness inventory, the purpose in life, the Holmes-Ray stress scale. That was a few of them. They did a biofeedback assessment where we measured their hand temperature, EMG levels, and so forth. And then they'd spend an hour and a half with me. And they were still subtly expecting something, because I had the master's of domination or medical deity after my name. That's why I trained Bobby to do the wellness assessments, because they didn't have that subtle expectation with her. And she took over doing that, and I actually had a lot better results, I think, than I did. But unfortunately, that was near the end of our 4.5 years of existence. So,
the health hazard appraisal has been very helpful to me over the years. It's really helped me when I see a friend or a colleague having difficulty in his or her life. We can talk about that.
Okay, David was just saying as he got up that he referred to me as John, and is asking when I became Jack, which I am to my friends. And that was when I was age 50. I actually had a transformational experience. But just to back up, I was born John Walton, but I had a grandfather, 2 uncles, and a cousin named John. And my mother thought that would be too confusing, so she took the T-O-N from Walton, added a Y, and I was known as Tony all through high school.
Never
and
heard
I hated
that.
it. I hated it because it was a sissy name. The only Tony in Bluffton that anyone heard of was Tony White Rain Shampoo. And when I later found out these big macho Italians were called Tony, that was like quite only known. But in the tiny little waspy town of Bluffton, Ohio, I was the only Tony, and I was Toenail and a few other variants that I won't go into. So I tried, I was Trav in college, which my dad had used that term. When I got to medical school, I reverted to John, and that was the 4 depressing years. And I struggled, and so it sort of fit with, because John is like either a toilet or a prostitute's customer. So I tried Sean, I tried Ian, I tried different variants of John. Nothing stuck. But on my 50th birthday, we were just about to buy this 40 acres of land up in Mendocino, and there was a cabin there. It had a phone line in it. We didn't own it. We didn't have a key to it, but we were up there walking the property, and I had brought a phone with me. I needed to call somebody, so I plugged into the outside connection, they just introduced that system so you could unplug your phone wiring and find out if it was your problem or the phone company's problem. And I was sitting there kneeling in front of this thing, I'd plug it in, it said network interface jack. And that, so I'm named from a telephone box. And I said, Jack. And then, but people still don't get that it's a valid nickname for John unless you mention Jack Kennedy. And then they get it. But which are you, Jack or John? Well, no, are you Bill or William or Dave or David, you know? So that's the story for you and others, although I still go by John professionally.
I understand that. But you and I both have talked about how important language is.
And names.
And names and meaning of names. And I remember me discovering the meaning of my name. I don't need to tell that story now, but
it's on the other recording, but you can say quickly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But it literally means, David means beloved from the Hebrew, and Isaac's means laughter, he or she who laughs or laughter. And when I got the whole thing, when I grokked that, so to speak, you and I know from grokking, right? Grokking.
Strange in a Strange Land. That's Robert.
Yeah,
Heinlein.
Robert Heinlein.
Yeah.
When I got that or grokked that, it gave meaning to my name and guidance to my life. That when I was in my best moments, if I can remember the meaning of my name, being beloved or being love and laughter, not laughing at but laughing with, that I was at my best. And that's been a dance that I've done most of my life, and it really shed light on mine. Did you ever find out what Travis means?
Yes, it's the same as traverse, and it came from Travers of Normandy, who was one of William the Conqueror's henchmen in 1066, and then married into a family that he conquered. But he came from Normandy, and there was some question as to the town that he lived in was something like Treviso or some French word. But it's definitely the same as Traverse and Travis is just an alternate spelling. And interestingly,
go ahead.
Interestingly, in the Mankind Project, they ask you to trace your male ancestors back. And I was fortunate to discover that my father had connected in his genealogic research, connected us all the way back to Travers of Normandy, 28 generations of male Travises that were recorded. So it's hard for me to imagine through the dark ages that I know the names of my ancestors on the Travis side. But
well, you know, I just had a hit. I don't know if this makes sense or not. That's a great story. The name of your book could be The Traverse of Wellness.
Well,
or the Wellness Traverse. Right.
I think I have traversed a lot of terrain in my
That's right.
in my journeys.
That's right. It's really, I mean, and you go back with your history of your genealogy, but also going back in the history of some of the forefathers of wellness. That's been a traverse.
Well, and I probably said this elsewhere, but Halbert Dunn, who is the grandfather of it all, I found out that I knew he had given these 29 lectures that constituted the 1961 book. In the late 50s, he did them at the Unitarian Church in Arlington, Virginia. And I then learned from attending a Unitarian church that the whole women's suffrage movement were Unitarian women. It was a Unitarian inspired movement. And so I thought, well, I wonder if Halbert himself was a Unitarian. And that I had the eulogies that his wife had given to me through Don Ardell. And I knew that he was buried at another Unitarian church. And I haven't been actually able to confirm that he was on the rolls, but the fact that he was buried in one and he gave these talks in one tells me he probably was a Unitarian. So the whole wellness movement came out of, again, a Unitarian background, which for those that don't know, Unitarians are, it's basically a church for atheists or agnostics. It's,
Or Jews.
yeah, it's socially oriented. It's sort of like the Quakers, only they talk more. It's much more intellectual than Quakers.
Yeah.
Well, where were we
Unitarian.
when you had to take a break? Because I know you've just had a medical procedure, and I'm delighted that you're
No,
performing
I'm
today.
good. I'm good. But something just came up when we talked about Unitarianism. Unity. Unity means together. And I remember back about the time that we were together, or sometime in the 70s, the Course in Miracles came out. And I remember not being able to get through that book, but someone showed me something in the center of the book, which has become a very important unity, so to speak, in my life. And what it states is that if humanity only had one problem that was macro to all the other problems that we have, it's the mistaken belief that we're separate.
Yeah.
The mistaken belief that we're separate. So if separation is the problem, unity or relationship or connection or community is the solution. And to be well means to be connected and not separate. To be well, body, mind, and spirit really requires it. And it used to be on the dollar bill. It's not there anymore. It used to say "E pluribus unum." You know what that means?
I didn't know they took it off. Huh.
Not there. It's
And
what
the
says
mint
there
is
now.
on
It says, "In God we trust." But "E pluribus unum" means out of many one.
Yeah. Well, just a little historical note again for our viewers that the Unity Church, which is distinctly different than Unitarians, they're very different. One is more heart-oriented and Unitarians are more head-oriented. The Unity Church did pick up A Course in Miracles. A lot of people don't realize that that title it's not it's like there's more of them, but none ever appeared. The Unity people, more than anyone, spread that around in the late 70s, early 80s. And I know for me, we struggled through it. Maren and I picked it up. But it was Jerry Jampolsky's mini course, where he had a 21-day course with little cards, where he picked out the key things. And we did that several times. And I think we must have distributed over 1,000 of them in our wellness kits. And I'm going to interview Jerry, I hope, very soon too. But another major influence in those days, those early days of wellness in the 70s, before it became equated with dog foods and eye colonics and all kinds of weird treatments that really have nothing to do with wellness, but are alternative treatments.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that I'm grokking about this conversation, and particularly your leadership and guidance and being connected to guidance, is the notion about togetherness, about connection. It's the cultural meme that we live in. Western culture is about pull yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
And no other organism other than mostly Western humans have fostered and guided the culture into a worship of individualism to the at the cost of abandoning the relationship orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And so wellness, that's another characteristic of being well, of wellness is connection, is relationship, is community.
That's what led to my 6-word summation of all my work of the currency of wellness is connection. And it also led to the fact that Kathy
Say
Wills,
that again. Say that again. The
The
currency,
currency of wellness is connection.
and
And
what about the double meaning of the word currency?
well, you pay attention. There are all these puns on the currency that I have played with. Um,
Energy, Jack.
oh, I haven't seen that. Yeah, you're a great word smither.
Current. I mean, for an electrician, how could you not remember that? Did you lose a wire there somewhere?
No, you're once again, David. You're beyond me. You're a step ahead. That's okay.
You know how to make a grown man blush, Jack.
Well, because this actually directly led to my second career. It was Kathy Wills who kept hounding me to read the continuum concept, which I eventually did, and got depressed for 2 weeks when I realized what I had missed as an infant and how disconnected I was. And that led to our whole shift into infant wellness and attachment parenting, and reading the Sears, who had just brought out their book on attachment parenting. And that led to the formation of the Alliance for Transforming the Lives of Children, blah, 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 which has been much more my focus in wellness for the last 25 years. But again, connection, it's so fundamental.
An end to separation.
Yeah. And our connection, which has meant so much to me over these years, and the beauty of a Zoom call or a Skype connection, even though we live on opposite sides of the US and half the year opposite sides of the planet, like we are right now.
Yep, I'm down under and you're up over.
Well, it depends on your perspective.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I think we're reaching our time here.
Saturation point.
What parting words of wisdom you have for coming generations? Not that every word out of your mouth isn't some kind of wisdom, but a wrap up or a last insight.
Never doubt the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
And I've forgotten the woman's name who that quote is attributed to.
Issue, you didn't forget it.
Well, I'm not remembering it. Do you?
Margaret.
Oh, Mead. Yeah. Yeah, good old Margaret Mead.
A lot of that came out of the South Pacific.
Yeah. An example of a connected culture.
Maori.
Yeah, and all the Polynesians in general. Not that they can't be warlike, but there's a level of connection that we once had, I think, in our Northern European.
No, I think we both believe that it's in every one of us.
Yeah.
It's built in genetically. I really believe that the species you and I would not be here, and everyone who we know everywhere had our ancestors not had the capacity of connecting.
Yeah.
Because if they were isolated, they couldn't sit around the circle at night and be in conversation around how we might survive the night. And only those people who had that capacity got to survive the night because they learned together how to do that.
Yeah.
So move from survival to thrival. And so that's all present. So when we come back to the World Cafe, people have said to us, this is new and wonderful. And we say, thank you very much. But we didn't discover it. We uncovered something, a capacity that humans have always had to engage in conversations around our most important questions, having to do with how we design a life worth living and ultimately one of thriving through community. So the other wisdom, and I think you have had in some different ways, but the same principle that exists is wellness has been open sourced. It really has, even though there wasn't an intentional, ours wasn't really intentional when it was real clear to us early. It's not better or worse. But the fact of the matter is that Mr. Dunn and you and some of the other fathers of wellness have open sourced it. You've open sourced it. You've given it away. Now, sure you share, and sure you earn some of your keep in doing it. But the key thing, it's spread because you didn't have to pay the people didn't have to pay the keeper for it. You know, you recognize principles and values and principles and values and situations and practices that design, convene, and open conversations into how we can be most well, individually and collectively. And I've told you many times, and you've stopped deflecting, which I'm so happy that you're no longer doing it. You've stopped deflecting. What a wonderful guide you have been, and a gift of a builder that has shared the wisdom that is and experience that's come through you, both in your genes, all the way back to those traverses and beyond, with the world today. And some people say, when I've gotten depressed, someone once said to me, you know, David, if you've touched one person in your life in a way that's made a difference, you've had a good life. You've made a difference. That's a great, and look how many we've all touched in our different ways. But there's similarity. The core similarity is learning together.
Yeah. Well, and you reminded me once again of another gift that you gave me, and it was in the 70s. It took me a while to get it, but I've retained it, the memory of it, of your saying, you know, even if you don't do another thing, you've earned your keep, because that was the message from my father's. What do you got to show for yourself at the end of the day? And my drivenness to always have a project and to earn my keep. But you early on gave me a sense of self-worth that I had already earned my keep, and I could relax some around that neurosis. Again, a wonderful gift from Brother David.
Thank you.
So
well, we all have.
On that note.
Yep. Adiosito.
Thank you so much. I want to get you and Juanita in for a World Cafe historical summary soon. But thanks for walking back in the halls of the 1970s and dredging up some of this oral history of wellness.
Been my pleasure, Jack.